Rachel Miller stood when the door clicked shut. The skyline of Seattle pressed like silver glass behind her. She was 32, a defense attorney with a measured posture and a cool courtroom voice. Shoulder-length dark hair tucked behind one ear, navy suit crisp, pearl gray blouse steadying her breath. Her office, orderly files, a fern clinging to a windowsill, the hum of rain, felt like a fortress she'd built against the mess of the past. Then he walked in. David Miller, mid-50s, tall but leaner than the memory she carried, a face lined by years he hadn't shared with her. Salt and pepper hair combed too carefully, a charcoal suit that fit but couldn't hide the tired slope of his shoulders. He smelled faintly of cold air and coffee. He'd grown up blue-collar in Tacoma, hustled his way into tech operations, and somewhere along the ladder, he had fallen. He closed the distance between them with a stiffness that wasn't arrogance. It was fear disguised as formality. "I'm not asking for a favor," he said, voice steady, colder than she had prepared for. "I'm asking you to do your job." The words were precise, chosen for distance. They landed like a gavel anyway. Rachel rested her fingertips on the edge of the desk. "My job," she repeated, weighing each syllable, keeping her tone calm even as her chest tightened. "Your company is Northbridge Systems. The allegation is fraud. You left when I was 10. The last sentence slipped out before she could stop it. A clean fact, but sharper than law. David took the chair opposite, the leather sighing beneath his weight. He clasped his hands, a habit of someone used to meetings where power sat on the other side of the table. "I can't talk to anyone else," he said. "It's complicated. It's urgent." His eyes, a tired steel, didn't quite meet hers. "I need the best chance I can get." Rachel drew a measured breath. The rain ticked at the glass like a metronome. She was good at refusing people. She had learned early that boundaries were life rafts. "Let's not pretend this is just a retainer and an hourly rate," she said softly. "You need my help." "Dad." The last word tasted unfamiliar. He flinched, barely, but she saw it. "This isn't personal," he replied, defaulting to business. "It's about evidence, timelines, who touched what file. I wouldn't be here if there were options." Her jaw worked once. She had spent 20 years building a life where he did not exist, a life of schedules and strategy, of closing arguments and clean endings. Yet his presence cracked something simple open, and the past bled through. "Northbridge," she said, steering herself back to the documents he hadn't brought yet. "Who else has keys to the vault?" "Tom Whitaker," he answered, co-founder, smart, careful. The way he said careful made her uneasy. She nodded, keeping the rhythm of an intake interview because rhythm was safer than memory. "If I take this," she said, "I run it my way. No lies, no omissions. If you withhold, I walk." David looked older all at once. "Agreed." He said it too quickly, as if speed could purchase trust. Silence stretched, thin but tight. Rachel's eyes drifted to the framed photo on her credenza. Her mother at a summer fair, holding a paper cup of lemonade, sunlight pinned in her hair. The ache rose, then settled. "I need time," Rachel said finally. "I have clients waiting. I'll review what you send." David stood. The lines around his mouth softened, then set again. "Thank you," he said, but it wasn't gratitude. It was a truce offered on the edge of a cliff. He hesitated at the door, as if another sentence might save him. None came. The door clicked. The rain kept time. Rachel exhaled and sank into her chair. She stared at the empty space he left, the ghost of a decade and a half threading through the quiet. She was a lawyer. She was a daughter. Tonight, she would be neither, just a woman sorting evidence from hurt. She reached for a legal pad and wrote 2 words at the top, in clean block letters that didn't shake. "Decide later." Then she turned the page and drew a box for facts, a box for risk, a box for heart. 3 columns, 1 case, and a storm rolling in over Elliott Bay. The rain eased by morning, leaving the city washed clean but heavy with cloud. Rachel Miller sat in the corner booth of a quiet cafe near Pike Place Market, her laptop open, untouched coffee cooling beside it. She wore a long camel coat over her black dress, hair tied low, posture straight. One of those people who didn't know how to relax even when alone. The waitress passed with a polite smile, and Rachel nodded absently, lost in the memory of her father's voice. Across from her sat Amanda Price, early 30s, her college roommate and closest friend. Amanda was warm where Rachel was guarded, soft curls, denim jacket, and the faint scent of vanilla lotion that followed her like sunlight. She worked as a therapist now, running community programs for women rebuilding their lives after divorce. She listened the way Rachel wished she could. "So, he just showed up?" Amanda asked, gently stirring her tea. Rachel exhaled, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "After 20 years, walks into my office like a client, calls me by name, not even a hello. Just, do your job." Amanda's brows knit. "And you didn't throw him out?" "I wanted to," Rachel said with a brittle laugh. "But I couldn't. He looked desperate." Amanda studied her for a long moment, her tone softening. "Sometimes forgiveness isn't about them. It's about you, getting free of what they left behind." Rachel looked away toward the window, where tourists drifted beneath umbrellas. "You sound like my therapist." "I am your therapist. Off the clock," Amanda teased. Then, quieter, "You don't owe him forgiveness, Rach. But maybe closure." Rachel nodded, but her gaze had shifted back to her laptop. A file folder was open. David Miller, North Bridge case. She scrolled through scanned bank statements, long columns of wire transfers, coded invoices. The numbers told a story, but it didn't add up. "The accounts move too cleanly," she murmured. "Too professional. My father couldn't plan this. He never balanced a checkbook in his life." Amanda frowned. "So maybe someone else did." Rachel's eyes flickered toward a name repeated across the documents. Tom Whitaker, co-founder and CFO. A man she remembered seeing once, years ago, in an old photo of her dad at a company event. Tall, silver hair, shark smile. Later that night, back in her apartment, the city hummed through the rain-soaked streets below. Rachel sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by case files. Each page was a piece of a puzzle she wasn't sure she wanted to solve. The lamplight painted soft gold across her face, highlighting the fatigue behind her eyes. She read until the words blurred, until her mother's face flickered in memory. Smiling, tired, resilient. "He left us for work," her mother had said once. "Maybe he just forgot how to come home." Rachel pressed her lips together. The anger had cooled into something duller, heavier, a wound that refused to close. The phone buzzed. Jessica, her old mentor, had texted, "Remember, law first, feelings later. Be precise, not personal." Rachel typed back, "Trying." But her hands hesitated over the keys. She wasn't sure which part was harder, the case or the history that came with it. Hours later, her laptop chimed with a new message. It was a shared drive link from an anonymous source. Inside, one folder, North Bridge, our internal audit. Her heart kicked up as she clicked. Dozens of files spilled open, ledgers, communication logs, encrypted notes. And there, embedded in a metadata trail, was the same name she had just whispered. T. Whitaker. Rachel leaned back, breath caught between disbelief and something close to fear. She didn't know yet what Tom Whitaker's role was, but the pattern was forming. Maybe her father wasn't as guilty as the headlines made him. Maybe the man who'd walked out of her life wasn't the villain in this story after all. Still, doubt was a stubborn companion. She closed the laptop and stared out at the distant lights reflecting off Elliott Bay. "You left me once," she whispered to the dark. "Don't make me regret coming back for you." The city wind howled softly against the glass as Rachel turned off the lamp. Tomorrow, she'd start digging. Tonight, she just let herself remember what it felt like to miss someone who had already left. Twice. The next morning, Rachel walked into her office at Pearson Lowell Law with a folder tucked beneath her arm and a storm behind her eyes. The city was gray, and her reflection in the glass looked like someone halfway between a daughter and a prosecutor. She dropped the folder on her desk, took a breath, and opened it. Her assistant had already left the case summary on top. State of Washington versus David Miller. Each page was a reminder that this wasn't just another client. This was her father, the man who vanished when she was still tying her shoes for school. David arrived exactly on time. He looked cleaner today. Navy blazer, white shirt, but his tie was crooked, his hands rough around the edges, as though time had refused to sand them smooth. His eyes darted to the framed degrees on the wall. Maybe pride, maybe guilt. He sat stiffly, as though unsure whether he belonged here. Rachel gestured toward the chair opposite. "Let's start," she said, professional, clipped. "If we're going to fight this, I need everything. No secrets." David nodded, his voice low. "I understand." She studied him for a moment, seeing the flicker of the man her mother once loved, confident, restless, full of impossible ideas. But that memory was buried under layers of silence and absence. He began describing Northbridge Systems, a mid-sized software firm in Bellevue that had grown fast, too fast. Tom Whitaker and I started it from scratch, he said, eyes fixed on the carpet. He handled finances. I handled operations. When money started moving wrong, I thought it was a glitch. Then the auditors came. Rachel jotted notes. You didn't report it yourself. I tried, he replied, rubbing his temples. But by then, the numbers already pointed to me. A knock interrupted them. The door opened to reveal Ethan Collins, a digital forensics expert Rachel had worked with before. Early 30s, tall, neat beard, wearing a gray Henley under a blazer, laptop bag slung over one shoulder. He had a quiet confidence about him, the kind that came from solving invisible crimes hidden in code. You called for backup, he said with a half smile. Rachel nodded. I need eyes on these transactions. Ethan nodded politely toward David. Mr. Miller, he greeted. David offered a curt handshake. I hope you're better at finding truth than lawyers are at trusting people. Ethan smirked slightly. That depends on how much truth you've got to give. As they dove into the records, the atmosphere thickened. Rachel moved between screens, cross-referencing documents, while Ethan scanned metadata and timestamps. The silence was filled with the soft clicks of a keyboard and the distant hiss of rain against glass. Every so often, David shifted, restless, like a man watching his own trial unfold. After hours of work, Ethan leaned back, eyes narrowing. These transfers, they're too uniform. Whoever did this knew the system inside out. Not sloppy, strategic. Rachel frowned. Could it be Tom Whitaker? Possibly, but he's covering tracks with proxy accounts. I'll need more time. When David left, Rachel lingered by the window, the skyline. Flickering with office lights below, Ethan packed up his gear but hesitated before leaving. You okay? Rachel let out a tired laugh. I'm not sure what that means anymore. He studied her face, the quiet war behind her composure. You're tougher than you think, he said. Or more stubborn, she replied softly. Same difference, he said with a smile, and left. Alone, Rachel sank into her chair. The folder lay open, her father's name bold, unforgiving. She thought of her mother's funeral, the empty seat in the front row, the silence afterward that stretched across years. She'd built her life from that silence. Now he'd returned to fill it again. She looked down at her notes. Whitaker, motive, pattern too clean, check-it trails. She drew a box around the last line. Find what he's hiding. The rain began again. Harder this time. Rachel closed her eyes, exhaled slow, and whispered to herself, not as a lawyer, not as a daughter, but as a woman caught between justice and grief. You walked out once, Dad. Let's see if you can walk back in the right way this time. Night swallowed Seattle in slow waves of rain and neon. Rachel sat in her apartment, surrounded by open case files and the dull hum of her laptop. Her living room looked more like a war room, papers taped to the wall, sticky notes in tight clusters of red and yellow, a timeline stretching from Q1 financials to audit leak. She hadn't slept properly in 2 nights. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago, but she kept sipping it anyway, as if it might keep her anchored. The knock on her door startled her. She turned, expecting no one. When she opened it, Ethan Collins stood there, rain clinging to his jacket, laptop bag damp at the edges. He gave a small, apologetic smile. You weren't answering texts. I found something. Rachel stepped aside. Come in. You look like you swam here. He brushed past, setting his laptop on the table. His expression was serious now, not his usual easy calm. I ran the metadata from the Northbridge server. There's a deleted email thread between your dad and someone inside accounting, but it's not what it seems. Rachel folded her arms. Explain. Ethan tapped a few keys, bringing up a reconstructed message. The subject line read, Expense reconciliation, urgent. Beneath it, one line froze her breath. David will take the fall if this leaks. Keep the files tight. T. Whitaker. For a moment, only the sound of rain filled the room. Rachel stared at the screen, her throat tightening. He actually wrote that, she whispered. Ethan nodded. Encrypted, deleted, buried under a layer of dummy accounts. Took me a week to dig out. Her hands trembled slightly. If this is real, it proves my father's being set up. Ethan met her eyes. It's real. Before she could process it, her phone buzzed. Dad. She hesitated, then answered. Rachel. I can't sleep. David's voice came through, low and frayed. I keep thinking you'll change your mind. I'm not changing my mind, she said. But we need to talk. Now. I found something. An hour later, they sat across from each other at her office. The city glowed through the tall windows, the streets still wet from rain. David looked exhausted, the kind of exhaustion that went deeper than the body. His shirt was wrinkled, his jaw dark with stubble. When Rachel showed him the email, he blinked hard, as if seeing a ghost. Tom, he murmured. I trusted him. Rachel studied him closely. You sure you didn't have any part in this? He lifted his eyes, the same gray-blue as hers, and for once they didn't waver. Rachel, I've done plenty wrong in my life, but not this. The tension cracked. Years of silence, anger, and guilt spilled into the air between them. Rachel leaned back, voice sharp. You left us, Dad. You left Mom sick and scared, and me paying bills I didn't understand at 12. And now, you show up because you need me? You don't get to rewrite what happened. David's face tightened, then softened. His voice dropped to a near whisper. You're right. I don't get to rewrite it, but I can tell you the truth. He told her about the night he left, how the company was collapsing, debt collectors were circling, and he'd made a deal with a private investor that went bad. I thought disappearing would protect you and your mother from what was coming, he said. I didn't realize it would just leave you with the fallout. Rachel felt the anger flare, then falter. She looked down at the email printout, the evidence that maybe, just maybe, he hadn't been lying all along. Her voice steadied. If you want me to believe you, then help me prove it. No more half-truths. We fight this together. David nodded, slow but firm. Together, he echoed. For the first time since he'd walked back into her life, his voice carried something new, humility. When he left, Ethan lingered by the door. He's telling the truth, isn't he? He asked quietly. Rachel sighed, rubbing her temples. I don't know, but I want to believe he is. Ethan hesitated, then smiled faintly. Belief is dangerous, but sometimes it's the only way forward. Rachel turned toward the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. Below, the lights of Seattle pulsed like a heartbeat. She whispered to herself, tomorrow we find out who Tom Whitaker really is. The rain didn't stop, but for the first time in years, she felt like the storm might be worth walking through. The courthouse in downtown Seattle rose like a slab of gray stone against the mist. Inside, the corridors smelled faintly of coffee and paper, the air taut with the kind of tension that comes before truth and consequence meet. Rachel Miller stood outside courtroom 4B, dark navy suit sharp, her hair tied back neatly. She clutched a folder pressed to her chest. Inside, the evidence that could either save or destroy her father. Beside her, Ethan Collins adjusted his laptop bag and lowered his voice. We have everything backed up. The email chain, the metadata, the timestamps. But it's still circumstantial unless we can tie Whitaker directly to the offshore account. Rachel nodded. We'll find it. We always do. Her tone was firm, but her eyes carried the exhaustion of someone who hadn't slept in 2 days. Across the hall, Amanda Price approached in a beige trench coat, clutching a small recorder in her hand. Her curls were damp from the drizzle outside, her eyes nervous but determined. Rachel, she said quietly, there's something I haven't told you. Rachel frowned. What is it? Amanda hesitated, then exhaled. Years ago, before Tom Whitaker married his wife, I was seeing him. He said he was single, ambitious, charming. I believed him. Rachel's jaw tightened. Amanda. I know. Amanda continued, her voice trembling. When the affair ended, he started Northbridge with your dad. And, one night, I overheard him on the phone, angry pacing. He said, David will be the perfect scapegoat. I didn't realize what it meant back then. But now, she lifted the recorder. I still have that voicemail saved. Rachel's breath caught. You kept it? Amanda nodded. I thought I'd deleted it, but it was archived in my old email. I pulled it this morning. It's rough quality, but you can hear his voice clear as day. Ethan leaned in, eyes wide. That's direct evidence. We can verify it through waveform analysis and match the timestamp. The door to the courtroom opened, and a clerk called Rachel's name. Showtime. She turned to Amanda and clasped her hand. You just gave us the missing piece, she said softly. Stay close. I might need you on record. Inside, the courtroom buzzed as people settled into their seats. Tom Whitaker sat at the defense table for Northbridge Systems, looking every bit the polished executive, gray suit, silver hair slicked back, expression smooth as glass. But when he noticed Rachel enter with her father and Ethan, his posture stiffened ever so slightly. The proceedings began. The opposing counsel painted David Miller as reckless and dishonest, a man who had siphoned company funds to hide his personal debts. Rachel let them speak. She'd learned patience was more powerful than protest. When her turn came, she rose slowly, voice steady. Your Honor, the defense requests to introduce new evidence that sheds light on the origin of these financial discrepancies. She gestured to Ethan, who projected the recovered email on the courtroom screen. The damning line glowed in black and white. David will take the fall if this leaks. Tom shifted in his seat, jaw clenching. Rachel's gaze didn't waver. This message, she said, was sent from Mr. Whitaker's. Device to an internal accountant 3 days before the first audit notice was issued. It was deleted, encrypted, and buried. My client had no access to these systems. But that's not all. She motioned to Amanda, who stood nervously near the witness stand. We also have an audio recording recovered from the same period. She pressed play. The grainy sound of Tom's voice filled the courtroom. David will be the perfect scapegoat. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Rachel stepped closer to the bench. Your Honor, the pattern is clear. The evidence doesn't show negligence. It shows orchestration, a calculated attempt by Mr. Whitaker to frame my client and divert scrutiny away from his own offshore accounts. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Whitaker, do you wish to respond? Tom's face had drained of color. He stammered. That could have been edited. Rachel cut in, calm but cutting. Then you won't mind us requesting a full digital forensic comparison. Silence. Tom looked toward his attorney, who whispered frantically, but it was too late. The truth was uncoiling, piece by piece. David, sitting behind Rachel, pressed a trembling hand to his forehead, his eyes wet. When the judge adjourned for recess, reporters swarmed the hallway. Rachel ignored them. She turned to her father, her voice soft for the first time in weeks. We're not done yet. But this is the beginning of the end. David met her gaze. Pride and sorrow tangled in his eyes. You didn't just save me, he said quietly. You saved what little of me was left to believe in. Rachel didn't answer. She just exhaled, looking toward the gray sky through the courthouse windows. Somewhere beyond the rain, Seattle's skyline shimmered, distant, unbroken, waiting for truth to finish what pain had started. The day broke gray over Seattle, the air heavy with fog that wrapped around the courthouse like a secret. Rachel Miller walked through the marble hallways with her father at her side, his step slow but steady. He wore a dark suit that fit too tightly around the shoulders, his hair combed back with effort. He looked like a man trying to piece together the image of someone respectable, someone the world would believe. Rachel's heels echoed across the floor, each sound counting down the seconds to the trial that would define them both. Inside courtroom 6A, the crowd was already seated. Reporters in the back, cameras forbidden, but curiosity thick in the air. Tom Whitaker sat at the prosecution's table, expression composed, gray eyes cold as steel. He looked every inch the successful executive. Crisp gray suit, tie perfectly knotted, fingers drumming lightly against the table. But Rachel saw it. The faint tremor in his jaw, the way he avoided looking at her. Guilt never walked upright. It always shifted its weight. Ethan Collins sat behind her, laptop open, his calm confidence grounding her. His brown eyes caught hers. Briefly, "You've got this," he mouthed. She gave a small nod, though her pulse raced. The session began. The prosecutor moved first, painting David Miller as reckless, a desperate man who siphoned company funds to cover his debts. Every word struck Rachel like static, but she sat still, face unreadable. When her turn came, she rose slowly, smoothing the papers before her. Your Honor, she began, voice low but resonant. Today, we're not just talking about numbers. We're talking about truth. She stepped toward the display monitor. This, she said, clicking to the recovered email, is an internal message sent by Thomas Whitaker, co-founder and financial officer of Northbridge Systems. The line projected across the room. David will take the fall if this leaks. Gasps whispered through the gallery. Tom's lawyer objected, but the judge motioned for silence. Rachel continued, pacing slowly. This email was deleted, encrypted, and hidden under dummy accounts. My father didn't write this. Mr. Whitaker did. And there's more. She turned to Amanda, who sat at the witness stand, hands trembling slightly, but voice clear. The old voicemail played through the courtroom speakers, Tom's unmistakable tone saying, "David will be the perfect scapegoat." The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Whitaker, would you like to explain this recording?" Tom's composure cracked. "That could have been taken out of context," he barked. "It was just a conversation." Rachel cut in, controlled and cold. "A conversation about framing an innocent man." Ethan rose next, presenting technical data. IP logs, file trails, timestamps linking Tom's computer to the deleted emails. "Every trace points back to Mr. Whitaker," he said. "No one else had access at that level." The room fell silent. Rachel looked at her father. He sat rigid, hands clasped, eyes glassy but proud. She turned back to the bench. "Your Honor, this case isn't about a man's mistake. It's about another man's manipulation. The evidence is clear. My client didn't steal a cent. He was used." Tom's lawyer tried to recover, stammering objections, but the judge had heard enough. He rapped his gavel once, the sound sharp and final. "Given the newly presented evidence, this court finds sufficient cause to dismiss charges against Mr. David Miller, pending further investigation into Mr. Whitaker's actions." A rush of noise filled the room. Reporters whispering, lawyers murmuring. David turned to Rachel, his lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. Instead, he just nodded, silent gratitude written across his face. Outside, the rain had stopped. Rachel stepped into the daylight, the courthouse steps gleaming wet beneath her heels. Ethan joined her, holding out his jacket like an umbrella, though the drizzle had faded. "You did it," he said softly. Rachel shook her head. "We did it." Behind them, David lingered near the doors, looking out over the city he'd once left behind. For the first time, Rachel saw something fragile in his eyes. Not weakness, but release. She didn't smile, not yet. Healing wasn't instant. It was earned. But for the first time in decades, the space between them didn't feel empty. The truth had finally spoken, and this time, it had chosen her side. The trial was over, but the echoes of it lingered like distant thunder. Seattle's skyline gleamed in the late afternoon light, rain clouds breaking into soft streaks of gold. Rachel Miller sat by the window of her office, overlooking Elliott Bay. Her desk was finally clean. No case files, no legal pads, just a cooling cup of coffee and the faint hum of traffic below. For the first time in months, she could breathe. The door opened quietly behind her. She turned. David Miller stood there, hesitant, a paper bag of takeout in one hand. He looked smaller without the courtroom tension, just a man in his late 50s carrying too many regrets and not enough time to fix them. His gray hair was mussed, his tie missing, his face etched with exhaustion, but also something gentler, hope. "I wasn't sure if you'd still be here," he said. Rachel gave a small smile. "Old habits. I don't know what to do when I'm not working." He stepped inside, setting the bag down on her desk. "I thought maybe dinner. You used to love the clam chowder from Pike's Market." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "You remembered?" He gave a quiet chuckle. "I'm trying to." They ate in silence for a while, the kind that wasn't heavy anymore, just unfamiliar. The hum of the city filled the space between them. David finally spoke. "I wanted to thank you, not just for the case, for not walking away. I don't deserve it, but you still fought for me." Rachel set her spoon down, studying him. "You're right," she said softly. "You didn't deserve it, but I didn't do it for you." He nodded slowly, accepting the sting in her honesty. "Then why?" Rachel leaned back, folding her arms. "Because I needed to prove that I could face you without anger, that I could do the right thing even when everything in me said not to." She paused, her voice softening. "I needed to know I was stronger than the pain you left behind." David looked down, his throat tightening. "I wish I could change it. I wish I could go back and be there. For your mother. For you." She watched him struggle to hold himself together. "You can't change what's done," she said. "But you can start by not running from it anymore." The sun dipped lower, streaking gold across the window. David nodded, his voice quiet. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope one day you'll think of me and it won't hurt so much." Rachel exhaled, the last of her anger slipping away like mist. "Maybe," she whispered, "but I think that's enough for now." The door knocked gently. Ethan Collins peeked in, casual in a dark sweater and jeans. His smile broke the still air. "Am I interrupting, or can I steal your lawyer for a minute?" David chuckled softly. "You can have her. I've already borrowed too much of her time." Ethan stepped inside, glancing between them with quiet understanding. "You two okay?" Rachel nodded. "We're getting there." Ethan grinned and handed her a small, wrapped package. "Found this at a vintage bookstore. Thought you'd like it." Rachel tore the paper carefully, revealing an old leather-bound book, Landmark Legal Arguments of the 20th Century. Inside the cover, he'd scribbled a note, "For the woman who defends truth, even when it hurts." She laughed softly. "You're terrible at small gestures." "Yeah," Ethan said. "That's why I make big ones." David rose, gathering his coat. "I should go," he said. "Let you two enjoy the evening." Rachel stood too. "Dad." He paused at the door. "Thank you for not giving up this time." His eyes glistened as he nodded. "You taught me how." And then he left, quietly, but not like before. This time, he wasn't disappearing. Ethan joined her by the window. "He's trying," he said. "I know," Rachel replied, watching the last light fade over the bay. "And for once, that's enough." They stood in silence, the city glowing below them, new lights flickering on, old shadows fading out. Rachel reached for her coat. "Come on," she said. "Let's go watch the sunset. For once, I want to see something end beautifully." Ethan smiled. "And maybe begin again." They stepped out into the cool Seattle evening. The rain had stopped, the air crisp and new. For the first time in 20 years, Rachel didn't feel haunted by the past. She felt whole. The bridge between who she'd been and who she'd become was finally rebuilt, not by forgetting, but by facing what broke it. And as the golden light touched the skyline, she realized she wasn't just her father's daughter anymore. She was her own person, strong enough to forgive, brave enough to start over.